Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel is an incredible journey, a journey that's made history in the world of gliding. The journey that we will be speaking about in the next incredible panel comprised of three gliders and one chase plane, and that journey made history by taking off from Riyadh. 3 gliders and 1 chase airplane, and it went in a circular route all over the western region or the western part of Saudi Arabia. That journey and that route was documented in an incredible book by Roger Harrison called Wings Over Arabia. If you could please give me the biggest round of applause welcoming His Royal Highness Sultan bin Salman, His Royal Highness Bندر bin KHALID الفيصل, Captain John Bally, and Mr. Roger Harrison, please.
Assalamu alaikum. This is a panel for the crew of the Arabian Winds. I've asked people to put the website here. If you go to Arabian Winds, WINDS, or you go الرياح العربية in Arabic, you'll see the whole fantastic documentary that Bender managed with a great American producer. Some great pictures of Roger Harrison. So on my right, I have John Bally. John was our boss on the trip, a very able glider pilot and an aviator in all sense of the word, and who really played a big role in my life and Bender's life in terms of training us. Since then, Bender has managed to fly a lot more than I did, because I got involved in a lot of things and a lot of planes. And I suppose Bender now, with all his responsibilities, is flying a lot less, which makes me very happy. I can catch up. Prince Bender bin KHALID الفيصل on my left. Of course, Bender is the son of a great man, an influence in my life, Prince KHALID الفيصل. And I have Bender's brother, Saud, here, who is inspired by Bender. Saud's benefited from every time Bender steps up to a plane, because I keep driving him to bigger and faster plane, Saud gets that last plane. So, and Saud is an aviator, and his wife also, Johara, mashallah, is an aviator. She's here with us in all sense of the word. Actually, she does all the work, and Saud gets all the credit. So, and of course, we have a very able man, a sort of an English Saudi kind of person. Roger Harrison is a journalist and a great photographer who's worked in Saudi for about 20 years and has photographs to die for. And he's done, I believe, a lot more work than many Saudis have done to promote this country in its reality. Saudi Arabia, like I say, you don't need to lie about it. You don't need to promote it by putting a lot of nonsense. Just say the real things in Saudi Arabia, especially about people. So Roger is our MC today, and I'll hand over to him.
Thank you. Could you pass the clicker?
This one? Could you say please?
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. After that very effusive introduction by His Royal Highness, what can I say? But this story is not about me, it's more about the pilots, but mostly it's about Saudi Arabia. Right, here we go.
Could you inquire what is the website for the...
I don't know that there is a website. Yeah. Okay. The whole idea of the trip was a first. It was an expedition. It was a first. It had never been done before, and as far as I know, it's not been done since. And it was two reasons. One, to explore Saudi Arabia, and 2, to see if gliding would be a viable sport here. Those are the main aims. That's what it was for, and it happened. So in June 2006, the team set off. This is a record of that expedition. And first of all, the route. This is the route we took. A great circle route starting from Riyadh and going round the kingdom and returning to Riyadh with a little diversion in Asiya to have a look around there for a day or so. Your Royal Highness, what actually inspired you to do the trip in the first place? Was it a new interest in gliders, or did you just want to do something really different?
Well, I think all, but the main inspiration was this man, this Bender. I started gliding in, I suppose, 84.
Yeah.
Ken can remind me when we took the G3, went to Hawaii on a break. I went to the US, or is it 85? I'm not sure. And then we decided in Hawaii that I wanted to try gliding. And I got my license in Hawaii. Didn't do much gliding, just a lot of flying and on the rope, you know, and did all the tests and got my gliding license, and that's it. Then in Aspen, Colorado, was it Dieter, Ken? Austrian or German? A German. Germans are world-class gliders, as you can see. There is Klaus Ullmann here, who is a world master, gliding the Andes, gliding the Alps, and you'll hear from Klaus, I suppose, tomorrow, his work. So we flew, I think it's a Grope, the glider, one of the old heavy gliders. Dieter was like, at that time was 70 years old or something, in the 80s. Yeah. So I flew with him in Aspen. We did quite a bit of gliding. Yeah. Then I continued gliding with a gentleman who actually crashed in a glider 2 to 3, I think 2 years ago. A friend of mine, his name is Bob, in Telluride, Colorado. A great glider man and a fantastic person. Yeah. And you'll read about him in my book when it comes out, and I hope the documentary. So when we came back, I decided to buy a STEMI like Bob. He used to call himself Glider Bob. So Bob had a STEMI, so I connected with the STEMI. I bought a glider, and there were some pictures that didn't show, and Monsieur Dossé, we used to glide in Charles Zoo. He helped me go and pick up the glider. I have pictures with Mr. STEMI himself, who now moved on to another thing, and picked up the glider. We flew to the Alps, to Megève in France, but we ran out of daylight. Just the winds didn't help us. So we ended up landing in Bern. Yeah. Bern. Yeah. We had no clothes, so we had to wash our clothes. At night, we couldn't find food because the Swiss decided to close up at 7 o'clock in the evening. Yeah. And we flew the next day over the Alps, about 5 hours, and was met by my wife and my little daughter, who's now 16, and a big reception in Megève. So Bender came up with this great idea, and he glued it all together, really. I was just in for the ride, and so I had 2 buses. Yeah. I had John, and then second in command was Bender, and I had to listen to everything they said, and I had to obey them and all that. You know how pilots and obeying. It's not really a very good mix.
John, how did you become involved in all this?
Royal Highness, His Royal Highness.
Which one?
Telephone.
Which one?
Your mic is off. Your mic is off. That one's not working. Is that one? It's working. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, I was on my farm in Wales and driving a tractor. We don't normally get a reception, but I happened to have my mobile, and you rang and said, could I come out to Megève and show you how to fly?
Recommended by Mr. Stem.
Oh, recommended by Stem, that's right. And I said, yes, well, when? And he said, tomorrow. And so that's how we first met up.
So it ended up in June 2006, we all got to Tamama by our various methods and means, complete with the chase team for the ground. And so a very dedicated team of mechanics, rescue crews, National Geographical filmmaker, and a whole team of support, because this is not a three-man effort. This is a team effort. The star is the country, the pilots are here, but there's a whole team behind it as well, you know. The equipment was the stemmer, and we assembled on June the 6th, all things checked, and we started out And when everything was loaded, we were off. Now, climbing out of Riyadh, I'm not a pilot, never have been. Maybe I'd love to been, but the point is, your perspective on any area of land or country changes with altitude. Now, I'd only ever seen Saudi Arabia from 30,000 feet in commercial airliners. This was a revelation. As we climbed out, the first thing you see is the Red Desert, just to the north of here. And as you go further along, so the scenery changes and becomes more challenging, more harsh, more beautiful. And as you said, John, there are no soft landings here.
No.
Maybe it's made by the British.
Yes, it's not a soft bed of sand. You know, there are rocks, and of course there are serious implications. You know, dehydration. You know, if one should end up with an outlanding. I mean, this aircraft here, if you're gliding and you need a restart, if you, for example, have a starter motor failure, you won't start the engine. Yeah.
Rise, I understand that although you trained together and sort of got yourselves together, you'd never actually flown in formation together.
Well, you know, as any plan, you know, it goes out the window once you take off. But in gliding in general, it's not very easy to stay with each other because you're always looking for the best climbs and so on. And John would always outclimb both of us, and he was, by the end of it, about 50 kilometers ahead of us. But it was working. It was, I mean, this was an expedition flight. The idea was to see how good gliding was, and right from the get-go. Out of Riyadh, we were climbing on a bad day in the mid-teens, so it was working and working very well.
Yeah. So in the true sense of the word, this was a settling down day, and everybody was getting to know each other.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Well, I came from an Air Force culture, so we used to do aerobatics in formation, very close, wing to leader, and we did a lot of flying, rolling, and all kinds of things. But in a glider, it doesn't happen that way. One of the most interesting and challenging things was getting the controllers in Saudi Arabia, like we did with the Aviation Club, working with a lot of people to get airspaces open, and it's a lot of work, really. But also with the gliders, I think one of the early experiences, and John has really transitioned me to the glider in the Alps. We flew quite a bit. He came recommended by Stemi, Mr. Stemi himself. I said, who is the best guy that I can fly with who can speak English? With John. So, when we took off with the gliders, now when we take off from here, normally they'll tell us climb 4,000 feet and go north to get away from the Riyadh control and maintain 4,000 feet. And we can maintain them with the STEMI, with the little engine. But then when we're gliding over to Hayel or Qasim, the guy will say, can you all maintain 8,000? We tell him, no, we can't. But one of the sweetest moments in gliding with the air traffic controllers here, when we start talking to each other and say, okay, we can shut down engines now. And you can hear all the 747s and all the aircraft going, are you declaring an emergency? Say, no, we're flying to Hayel. You know, we're going to Qasim, 600 kilometers or whatever. So that's the sweet stuff about gliding, really.
So on the first day we were heading for Hayel, it was genuinely a settling down day. The scenery was always surprising, and new recognition of how important water is to the kingdom became very obvious from just a few thousand feet altitude. Before and after, crop circles with water and crop circles when the water has run out. So we proceeded northwards and passed over Qasim, the date growing area, or the biggest date growing area in the kingdom. Statistics are quite amazing. 7 million of the 25 million palm trees in the kingdom are in Qasim, and it makes Saudi Arabia the biggest date producer in the world. And to see it there in front of you, for me, an absolute experience. So going northwards, we got the first hint of Saudi's volcanic history. Now, a lot of people do not understand or have no idea that Saudi Arabia is actually a very volcanic region. Of this more later, and spectacularly so. it's only when you get to altitude over an open space that you realize the freedom you have. Any pilot here will know that, but to me, entirely a new experience. Well, we achieved Heil at the end of the day, and because of the complexity of a modern glider, there had been gremlins. John, you had one or two minor problems which you had to overcome on keeping people in touch and actually getting back to the ground. As they say, taking off is an option, landing is mandatory, and you had a bit of a problem with that.
Well, it was the end of the first day, and it was a shakedown. The visibility wasn't very good, and it was really just sort of trying to solve the grumblings. And the only one I had was I couldn't get my undercarriage down, so I had to do a dead drop. But that was no issue.
Frankly, I would be terrified, but that's experience for you. And I believe you lost touch in communications as well. There were some electronic problems.
Yeah, I don't really recall that. I mean, we were quite split up, but we all arrived roughly the same time.
Yeah.
No, I think there was about an hour and a half difference between when you landed and the rest of us landed.
Right. We had to find our way, navigate our way. Yeah. We're not flying in formation. No. We split up and we tried to find the best thermal, the best wind. Some dropped to the ground. My experience, the kind of near-miss experience, you'll see it in the movie, which is a great movie, Arabian Winds.
Yeah, that's on the screen now.
Is that towards the
this
thing, and I was just asking John, we were flying from Jeddah, going to Abha, and we just had a great flight. And then John and I broke out and went up to 23,000 on oxygen. And we're just playing with the base of the clouds, and he will pop up from this side, I'll pop up. Great flight. But he being a professional, and Bender being a very obedient pilot, he followed John. Being an explorer, I thought I could beat them to Abha, going straight forward. What happened is that they went beyond the escarpment, and they can, if that problem happens, they can go down to the beach side even. I went inland, and the clouds came, and the stones, the rocks, became cold. The engines were cold, coming down from 23,000. So I got so low in the mountains of Asir, where wolves live, and of course I had a gun, and I had some dates, and I had some protection. But the rocks were really a challenge. And then I tried to call. I think they would hear me, but I can't hear them. I'm not sure what their story was. To call if they'd send a helicopter, rescue, whatever. And then I tried to start the engine wouldn't start because it was cold. So I got down to really about 1,000 feet. And then I started looking for anything that has any sign of thermal. So I found rocks with still some, and I found some heating. But in glider, you have to be very patient. So it took me about 40 minutes to go up 200 feet and then come down 100 feet. And then when I got up to about 4,000 feet, I was high enough they can hear me or something, and headed to Abha. I started to see if the engine would start, and the engine started.
I believe you.
So I decided I'm not going to use the engine.
I believe you had the assistance of a local vulture at one point. You spotted it in a thermal somewhere.
Yeah, remember we always look at the vultures and look at the birds, and we fly right under them. Especially here near Hraimla, there is a whole school of vultures and big birds that we always, when we see them, we go fly, and they would fly over us and look down at us all the time. We can actually see their faces looking down at us.
Yeah. Anyway, having overnighted at Heil, sorted out a few of the electronic problems and John's undercarriage problems, we moved on the next day, and again, the association of water and habitation and life in the kingdom became very obvious very quickly. And the scenery was startling because, again, the general impression outside the kingdom is that it's a sandy desert.
You want to point this out? This is the volcano.
Yeah, well, we got it coming. And, of course, only, I say only, about a quarter of the kingdom is desert, but it's a big quarter. We'll see that later. But, again, the sand isn't very deep. It takes years to push the native rock underground and become desert. The team was busy. We got fed up with trying to poke the cameras out of a little window and a little door. So we took the doors off, and that made it interesting. Now, we all know that gliders need lift. Lift comes from warm air, thermals, which rise and give you lift. And we always looked for the highway. And there's your highway, Prince Bandar, which is the whole thing about flying without an engine, because the engine is only there to get you out of trouble or cover long distance quickly. But the highway of basalt giving you lift.
Well, you know, gliding is all about lift, and I feel very strange talking about this when you have people like Klaus sitting there and Renee, and you know, these are masters of gliding, and John as well. But yes, clouds are a very good cue of where lift is.
Yeah.
And this picture was taken just after Hail, and those bases were up to 23,000 feet, which was amazing. Yeah. I mean, I've never thermaled up to 23,000 feet. So it was an eye-opening experience. And I think John and I got a few really good climbs in Hail. And there was a 400-kilometer straight shot all the way to Al-Wedge on the Red Sea. So that was very, very special.
Yeah. And having achieved that, we were heading west towards the Red Sea coast. And of course, over water, there's much less lift. And so this is when the Stemmer's engine came into full value. In the cool air with very little lift, which took us down the coast. And we turned inland again a little later and headed for Al-Ula and Madain Salah, and encountered probably some of the nicest looking scenery in Saudi Arabia, because it's a spectacular combination of iron mixed sandstone rock and desert. And there you got the formation together, and we had some fabulous shots of you flying tight in formation. Did that present any problems, those sandstone things, except lack of landing space, or were there any challenges to that particularly?
Not I can think of.
No.
It was actually very good, wasn't it?
Yes, we had to get inland because obviously, well, not necessarily so obvious, as the land mass heats up, it will draw in cool air. And the Red Sea, although relatively warm, is cool. And so as that air comes in, we call it a sea breeze effect. And so near the coast, there won't be any lift at all. It'll be totally stable air. So we had to push inland to get to unstable air, and then we were into soaring. But we, of course, had to break up the soaring because of photography as well. So we did quite a lot of low-level flying under power, and then climbed and continued the journey.
This picture, sorry, John. This picture particularly shows the sheer size and scale of the rocks in the area around Al-Ula. But if you look on top there, another clue to Saudi's volcanic history is given. Black basalt from a volcano. So at some point, that was covered in black basalt. So we moved on, and eventually came to Al-Ula. Now, Al-Ula is famous insofar as it's been a settlement for 2,000 years or so. The Dedianites, the Lichianites, and the Nabateans all fought over it because it's only a few kilometers from Madain Saleh, which is Saudi's Petra, and it's the southern end of the Nabatean kingdom. And passing towards Al-Ula, we passed over Elephant Rock, a very famous rock formation, one of the most unusual you'll ever see. Come on. Yeah. I'll just do that. And eventually, a few kilometers later, we reached Madain Salah itself, the carved tombs. We did a fly past to look at it. An interesting thing you don't realize until you get up close is that tombs were carved from the top downwards, so that the workmen could chip the rubble off the rock face and it would fall. They didn't need scaffolding, which was handy because there's no wood. And that's Madain Saleh Station, which was a stop on the Hejaz Railway, and this was a quarantine area where pilgrims got off for a while before they went into Medina. An amazing thing, the Hejaz Railway. Pieces of it are still there, and it's like something out of Close Encounters of the Third Time. You'll be in the desert and suddenly you see a railway train and you think, how the heck did that get there? Whatever. Here, of course, now we're getting towards, excuse me, Medina, and the black basalt from the volcanoes, the harat of the volcanoes, the black basalt, is becoming more obvious. We're in the right section of Saudi Arabia now, the northwest section, where volcanic activity was at its greatest. And the volcanoes became obvious. There were three famous volcanoes, the Black Widow and the two White Sisters. And they are spectacular, to say the least, especially from about 4,000 feet. White ash cones, highly sulfurous, and we flew over those, and that ash cone was quite incredible, and Prince Sultan obliged us with the picture of a lifetime as he flew over it, and it's up there. Any particular problems flying over areas like that? Because you've got the jet black of the basalt with lift, and you've got white that doesn't reflect much heat. You've got rather a big hazard faced in front of you.
Well, this picture gives you an idea why am I flying. You know, who would see a picture like this from the flight? I actually flew also in a Cessna Caravan one time exploring, and I flew inside the volcano, literally turning at almost like 45 degrees, circling inside the volcano. But I have to say that I actually missed the part of the trip between Hail and Wedge, which is West Saudi Arabia, looking over the Red Sea, because I got called by my boss. That time was Prince Sultan, the Minister of Defense, for a meeting. And these two guys had fun of their life because they caught some serious thermals. So when my boss calls, I go. Unlike Ken Hoffman, you see, he tells me I'm his boss, but when I call him to come, he doesn't come, all the time. But we went to Al-Ula. Of course, Al-Ula, when I was Minister of Tourism, I think we made it into a UNESCO World Heritage Site. When we left, there was 800 million riyals of projects in Al-Ula. Now Al-Ula, the Ula Festival now, the music, the events, and so on. I was just reminding myself and asking John, flying from Al-Ula to Medina was spectacular because we caught, was it a street we caught, more or less? A string of clouds? A street clouds, they call it. So we didn't have to do any turning. Literally, we were going at almost 100 miles an hour with nose down, so the gliders don't go up, and the wings were like bent like this. At any time, I was thinking the wings were going to snap. So I had my parachute ready to jump out if I could. But it was amazing. For maybe 100, 120 miles, we're just flying straight, really fast. So that was one of those experiences.
On this trip, this kind of place, spare a thought for the ground team who were chasing us in the massively equipped four-wheel drive.
I want to point to Captain Zakaria. Where is Zach? Captain Zakaria is here? Where is he? Can you stand up, please? Here he is. He's the pilot of the Twin Otter. He was my pilot at that time. He was piloting the Twin Otter. So thank you very much for the chase. We had the ground chase, Captain Ahmed Zahrani. I don't know if Ahmed's son is here. I wanted his son to be here because Ahmed passed away in an aircraft accident here in one of those track things. And the ambulance got late and he passed away. It was really, really amazing. Sultan Baghdadi is not here today maybe, but he was one of those people. So we had a great, great crew. And of course the movie director and all the other people that were on board. But flying over Medina, and I did a photograph, and I think you did too, of the Haram. In Saudi Arabia, we don't fly over the Holy Mosque in Medina. And in fact, I got a picture about a month ago of the Haram that will blow your mind. Prince Saud now is the deputy governor of Medina, so I don't want to be arrested and all that. So let this one go, and I'll give you a flight in the Learjet again.
Yeah, the flight down to Medina, as His Highness said, was interesting, and the approach to Medina is surprisingly unspectacular. But as we approached, we realized in the back end of the chase craft, they knew exactly what they were doing. We realized we were actually going to fly over Medina itself. And it treated us to something that was really special for us in the back. We couldn't believe what we were looking at. a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Go back to the original one. Oh, that should be back, sorry. Wrong button. Don't ever ask me to get in the cockpit. I'll press the wrong button. There you go. And we flew over Medina at very low level, much to the nervousness of local air traffic control, and then were able to do a very low pass over the Prophet's Mosque himself, which is truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And then we flew down the coast to Jeddah. No particular problems there, John?
Jeddah.
Any problems?
Any problems?
Want the pilots to admit there was a problem?
No, I'm just asking, you know. I didn't see one.
You don't need to press anything, John. It's on. Yeah, it's a red light. You might have. You were slightly low on fuel, I think.
Jeddah? Maybe.
Yeah, I think you used the engine a little bit more than we
I think so. Yeah.
There's an admission going on here that one of them was low on fuel, but we won't say that.
I have to say, in the flight, these two guys flew a lot better than I did. And I think also there was a chance when I went low in Medina and to do that photography, then I had to climb up to 24, 23,000. And remember the rain, we had some rain.
Yeah, we did.
We had some rain over the volcanoes. So the rain was scary because it's raining on you, the clouds are black right on top of your canopy. So I had to go low, and that's where that picture happened. So I might have used more fuel. I was kind of low on fuel also coming to Jeddah.
And when we arrived in Jeddah, that's Jeddah, of course, in 2006, and Jeddah turned on its fountain to greet us, an absolute landmark. Something a bit special there, Prince Bandar.
Well, I mean, the only thing that's special, I mean, I know Jeddah very well, so we know these sceneries
You
very
want to
well.
go above it, you don't want to get wet.
Well, there's two aspects. It's overflying the King's Palace, which we were all a bit nervous
Exactly.
about. In a glider, we had no option. We just overflew that. And then landing in Jeddah International Airport with 747s coming in.
Right.
And we tucked in behind Captain Zakaria and his twin otter, and we just followed him in, and he declared a flight of 3, and we just all landed at the same time on the same runway to the amusement of the air traffic controllers.
Absolutely. A one-ton or less glider up against a 380-ton jumbo jet, and here we are parading in stately process, everybody saluting happily and giving us clean space to get in. That's quite an experience. Anyway, next day we were off down the Taif Escarpment, and it was, shall we say, interesting. I used that word that Captain Zach used over there. His comments on things are usually one word and not very informative, but he described the stay as interesting. We had buffeting updrafts, we had lift, we had turbulence, and these guys described it. I tell you, there's something about pilots. They have a strange sense of language. They describe this as fun. The entire crew in the chase plane was airsick, diving on equipment, trying to stop it sliding out of the doors. We were being thrown around like a leaf. They called it fun, and Captain Zach called it interesting. I will never understand you guys, but you can see how dangerous it could have been. That is a very solid piece of rock, and flying within a few feet of it only was something of a challenge.
Yes, perhaps I ought to just expand a bit on the theory side. The Saudi Arabian Peninsula, many millions of years ago, tilted. And you have this escarpment that runs all the way down to, from Taif down to Abha. And there are no valleys through. So as the empty quarter heats up, the colder, relatively colder air comes in from the Red Sea, drawn in by that heat, and it meets this escarpment. And it provides one of the probably the best convergences I've seen in the world, because the air can't go round, it just goes up. So it's really unstable, and we like unstable air, glider pilots. But of course, the other fact, you can ridge fly it, but you also fly the convergence. And of course, in that instability, you do get big thunderstorms.
Well, happily, the next day we decided to be grounded. We, the chase plane, decided to be grounded, and we touched blessed earth on the top of the highest point in Saudi Arabia, Jebel Souda. But the pilots decided they were going to have fun again. I think I'll ask you to comment on this, Prince Bandar. Will you admit to this?
Well, Sauda is the highest point in Saudi Arabia. The highest point in Sauda is 10,000 feet above sea level.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what John was describing, that warm, hot, moist air coming in from the Red Sea, from the west part, which is where these people are looking, meets with the escarpment, and you have this unstable air mass with a lot of updraft. And we haven't explored this yet, but I reckon all the way from Sauda down there in the south, all the way north, I reckon, to the Tabuk area, because you have this mountain range. And this is something Klaus would be interested in, but it's not wave. You're going to have to do this the hard way, thermals. But I think you could get over 1,500 kilometers of energy lines. It's just a matter of how fast you can do that, but in thermals or convergences, not wave action, which is very interesting.
I think even someone who's as ignorant of piloting as I am accepts that this takes an awful lot of skill. Think about this. The starboard wing is only about 15 feet above ground level, scaring the heck out of the locals who are thoroughly enjoying themselves. But the port wing is about 10,000 feet above ground level, with the updrafts, the thermals, the buffeting, and you have to hold it stable. And how fast are you traveling at something along this?
You'd be about, it's not fast, you'd be about probably 70 knots, something like that. It's not fast at all.
There must have been a hell of a lot of challenges and concentration needed to keep you online.
Well, oddly enough, no, because you want that comfort of the air coming up, and it's a good feeling that you know you can go up when you need to.
Yeah. Fun redefined. Anyway, to move on. More rather challenging escarpment down which we flew towards Jizan Najran in the south and towards the Rub al Khali. On the way, we passed Jebel Faifa, which is one of the wettest areas in Saudi Arabia, 10, 15 inches of rain a year. Very wet, very green, lots of interesting flying to be done amongst the valleys. Did the cooler valleys there present any problems, anybody?
No, I think we did end up with an engine start at some point, which was a good thing. But I mean, keep in mind, we're exploring here. We don't know what to expect. This is all new to us. And I think this country has a lot to offer when it comes to gliding. It's just a matter of bringing in pilots and flying it, going out there and doing it.
Just one comment. When we went, did we go to Jizan together? Jizan? I thought that Bender and I went. We all did? Because we got into a ball. I was following Bender, and I got low on a ball.
Yeah, blame Bender.
Blame
following
Bender. And we have Ziad, he's a lawyer, a top lawyer, so, you know, I can take your G5 away. Well, and then what happened is that the ball was kind of tight, so I wanted to make a turn, and I got my flaps on and the things, and I actually kind of pulled it too much. Pulled too much. I was actually feeling the G's. And then I can feel the glider. I didn't pay attention to the speed. So I can feel the glider shaking, you know, stalling and dropping. And I thought this was maybe the 8th life I'm consuming now, because I've gone through 7 lives already. So, but then I picked it up. And then when we went back to Asir, we got the engines going and we went all right.
I think what Prince Sultan has just said indicates that this wasn't just a jaunt in the park. It was an exploration trip. Hadn't been done before. Nobody really knew.
That's what we call it when we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're exploring.
Yeah. But there's a serious side to it. Make a mistake and you're in as much trouble as you'll ever be. As you can see, because of the topography, terracing is the way the farming is done, water conservation. And with 10 inches a year, it's quite a fertile area. One of the few places in Saudi Arabia where there's actually water most of the year. And then, of course, you leave the area and you encounter the Rub al Khali, which is the biggest continuous sand desert in the world. And it's actually bigger than France. And if anybody ever asks you, is it the biggest desert in the world? No, Antarctica is technically the biggest desert in the world. Now, in this desert, of course, you've got heat coming from everywhere, and there were no problems crossing that.
Well, I missed this part because my boss decided to call me again. That's the part I really wanted to fly. Because I go to the Rub al Khali with the caravan a lot, and I spend nights. It's the only place in the world where the sand dunes are clean. These are golden sand dunes, not dusty sand dunes.
Yeah.
So when we're in Rub al Khali, we don't wear shoes, socks or shoes. And it's the most spectacular place in the whole universe.
Yeah.
It's like moonscape or even Marsscape even. It's just valleys and valleys. So these two guys did the trip and brought the plane back. You want to talk about that?
Yes, the first part was actually quite difficult. You think you've got all that heat and you'd have instability, but perhaps we needed more heat, but it was well over 40 centigrade. But it got better when we got to Wadi Dawasa. And there's amazing rings of irrigation. And that sort of broke things up a bit, and so we then got a bit more unstable air. We needed to fly quite fast because we had 1,100 kilometers, and we knew we'd be running out of daylight.
That was a long haul, wasn't it, across that?
A long haul, and we were really wanting to be up in the 120 kph
it was about
average.
the only place we visited where you might expect a nearly soft landing. So there was one advantage.
Yeah, but perhaps Prince Bandar, you would sort of maybe talk about how we had clearance through Riyadh.
As John said, it was the longest haul. It was about 1,100 kilometers, so we had to keep the speed up. Unfortunately, night caught up with us on that, like coming into Riyadh, and it was my first night landing in a glider. But it worked, so it was fine.
Is there lights on the runway?
There were lights, yeah, the runway was lit, yes.
Okay. Eventually, Riyadh hove into view. It was a reflective moment because it had meant we'd come full circle. That was it. The trip was ending. We were near the end of it. A mighty experience. That's Riyadh in 2006, Manama Park. Very different now.
Yeah. And one thing that we enjoyed, Bender and I, doing in here, in Tamama, when we first leased this airport from the authorities here, it's a small airport, no hangars, we'd get up in the gliders with engines, go to the escarpment, shut down the engines, and people will be standing by the only hangar standing there, talking, whatever. We'd come from behind the hangar in the gliders, no noise. Right on top of the hangar, high speed, we'd dive, and we come right on top of their heads at high speed, and they don't know what happened. Boom, like the glider's coming back. So that was a lot of the fun. One time I took my son, Salman, he was much younger. Now he's finishing his business school thing, up in the escarpment. We came back, and it was summer, and so the escarpment here was very well heated. And we were 30 kilometers out maybe, and he said, aren't we gonna get the engines going? Because we're right on the rocks. See, the glider had, he asked me once, he said, what are these fluorescent, this is my glider actually. At the end of the wing, these red markings. I said, you'll find out. So when we come back, those red markings were 1 foot away from the rocks to get the thermal. So he said, aren't we gonna get the engine because we're so low, right on these mountains, on the other side? I said, no, we don't need to. And we actually flew all the way to here with no engine and managed to climb with all the speed and do a dive and do some air work and land. So that's the joy thing about the gliders. And you mentioned today, Bender mentioned the 1,500 kilometer thing. I would be willing, if you guys are willing, and Klaus is here and Dosé is here, is to get a bunch of people, and I'm actually getting, my glider is getting a new engine and all that, is to do that trip one day. And I spoke to His Majesty the Sultan of Oman, who's an old friend, the new Sultan. And he said he'll allow us to do Oman by gliders. So why not do another glider trip, and get that going, inshallah.
And so concluded the experience of a lifetime for me, a first successfully completed over, as you can see, tricky terrain, which gave no mercy at all if you happened to hit it. And we all landed safely. And as a personal thing, gentlemen, experience of a lifetime, absolutely a life-changing experience, which I thank you all.
You will come for the next trip, though. You'll come for the next mission, right?
Absolutely. Try and
I don't know
keep me
about
out.
I don't know about Zach, you know, if he is up to flying or not, but we'll see. I want to show you something. Prince Saud is here, and Johara is his captain. Now Saud is a co-pilot, by the way. Is here. I've got a picture here I took in my farm in the desert. I have a runway there. When I brought the Learjet, I did some low passes and Learjets with Saud together. And we passed over the camp where their whole family was staying, where I'm invited the whole family. And I passed with the Learjet with all the noise to wake them up. So the little girls, my little granddaughter is 4 years old, with his daughter and a bunch of other very noisy little girls, sat on the cars while we did all the air work and did some really fantastic things. When we parked the airplane, I'm going to show you this picture, all the little girls ran into the cockpit. So I'm going to tell Ken that those little girls are going to be his students, inshallah, in the next 10 years, Ken. So there is a photograph. Saud and I and my son Salman trying to get these little girls out of the cockpit. I don't know if you can see it close enough, or the camera can get it. You can get it? There we go. It was a fight getting those girls. They thought it was a video game. So that was one of those fun things in life. So I'm doing this one to give it to Saud and Johara today, giving that house for memory, inshallah.
Your Royal Highnesses, thank you very much. Any input, sir? No? John?
I'd just really like to thank you, Royal Highnesses and Saudi Arabia, for providing a memory that one will never forget. And to do it in a glider was such a privilege.
And as an aside, the tourists who don't come here don't know what they're missing. And let's hope for a very good touristic future. And Saudi Arabia being presented in the world in a way that you've never seen it before, probably never even knew it existed as. If you have been listening, many thanks. Thanks for everything. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for the amazing panel, and thank you for moderating it. اسمه الأمير بس نحتاجك معنا شوي. Yes. Before we end today's amazing session and before we head out to the air show, I would like to introduce Captain محمد إسباعي, مدير أكاديمية الطيران, for him to present the secret surprise.
السلام عليكم جميعا. اسمه الأمير إن شاء الله بإذن الله. And good afternoon. It's great to be here. Samu Al-Amir, under your leadership, National Aviation Academy has progressed very well in 2019. It's an academy that will grow to have 300 pilot students, male and female, and hopefully we're targeting, inshallah, 750 aircraft maintenance technicians. Today, I'm happy, under your leadership, to launch the official website of the National Aviation Academy. You can press on the link, Samu Al-Amir, and then... Absolutely. The National Aviation Academy
you have a moment?
Is not-for-profit national institute. The founding stakeholders are Saudi Aviation Club, Saudi Aramco, the Ministry of Education, Economic Cities Authority, Saudi Airline, TVTC, Taqniya Aeronautics, and King Abdullah Economic City.
What's the cost of a new college here?
البروجرام أو الطلاب. Student cost, الكلية. So we're projecting here probably 50 to 60 million riyal will be the investment at Tamam. And King Abdullah Economic City, we started the aircraft maintenance technician program in March. It's a foundation year that addresses English, math, and science. And the students sponsored by Saudi Aramco and Flynast and Salam will go into their technical program in March. Thank you, Samu Al-Amir, and on the screen is the website.
And when we announced this, the partners, as you see, are the partners that you want to partner with in Saudi. When we announced this, we said to ourselves, this is going to be the best pilots ever made. No being nice guy. People that will come and go to airlines, go to business aviation, and get 2 years worth of very intensive training, the best simulators, the best of everything. So I think the general cost will be almost 100 million in the college here. So inshallah, we'll start breaking ground this next month. I hope so. No? Oh, we're partners with UND also, University of North Dakota. And thank you for Joe Clark also. When the time came for bidding this project, North Dakota was by far the best partner, and Joe got in the middle of it also and made it easier to negotiate. So Joe is a supporter of the university. Thank you.
We can head out to the incredible air show to get some thrill and to get some adrenaline. Thank you all for being a part of Hangar Talks Day 2. Thank you for being here, and we can't wait to see you tomorrow.